Okay, let's get started. Hello, and welcome to today's training, Read Your Email, Message, and Newsletter Accessibility, presented by the Maryland Statewide IT Initiative. My name is Dan Doggett, and I will be your presenter for today's session. Before we begin, I have a couple of housekeeping items for today's session. First, live captions are available for today's webinar. You should see an option to enable them in your Zoom controls. Also, you should have received an email from us from the mdod.nva@maryland.gov email address with the subject line demonstration email for training. If you didn't, please put your email address in the chat now, and when we have a moment, I will send that out to you so that you have it. That's for a little demonstration we're going to do later on today. So just throw that in the chat for me if you didn't get it. Just so you know, today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel for later reference. Also, please feel free to add your questions or comments to the chat or the Q&A box throughout the presentation. I'll do my best to answer them as we go. And I do think we'll have enough time at the end if we have some questions to go over that were not done during the course. So, okay. So here's what we'll be covering today. We're going to start by discussing why email and newsletter accessibility is so important, especially for those of you who work in public service. We're also going to dive into sort of best practices for both email and newsletter accessibility. As stated before, we're going to do a short exercise, pulling those concepts into practice. And then finally, I'm going to go over a couple of different resources available to you for later learning and support. Okay, let's get started. So let's start with the why when we talk about email accessibility. So why is this so crucial, especially for many of you in the audience? So knowing our audience, many of you work in local or state government roles where you're responsible with engaging with the public. This means your communications need to be accessible to everyone. So specifically, Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act holds local and state governments accountable for being accessible. And that includes any public-facing information and services, including emails and newsletters. So maybe you don't work in local or state government. Maybe you have a communications role for a company. But if you regularly engage and communicate with a large and varied audience, there's a good chance that many of those people have disabilities, which means that they also use assistive technology to read their content. So another really important reason why we want to be mindful of this. And then lastly, one of the reasons I find that is a benefit of email accessibility is it's relatively easy to do, and it benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities. So let's go ahead and get started and talk about some of our email best practices. Any of you who have done any of our digital accessibility webinars in the past, some of this information might be, you might be familiar with this, but we're going to go over this to make sure that sort of everyone's on the same page. So the first thing we're going to get started with and think about is color and fonts. One of the most important things to think about when it comes to email accessibility is the font color choices that we make in our emails. Generally speaking, your default text is going to be black on a white screen. That's going to be the highest contrast. Sometimes, especially when people are writing newsletters and they get a little bit more creative with the visual aspect, that might change. But basically, what we're aiming for accessibility is that there's a contrast of about 4.5 to 1 with the text color and the background color. So that's sort of the minimum that we want for accessible color contrast. There's a lot of online tools to sort of help you measure that contrast, and we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. But generally speaking, if you're not sure, black text on a white background is going to be your safest bet. In general, we want to avoid using bright colors as well. They can be hard to read for, a lot of people, but especially those with certain visual impairments. Another important thing to remember with color is to make sure that it's not the only way that you're conveying information. So, for example, you don't want to say all departments highlighted in red will be included. Instead, specify them by name or use another visual cue, whether it's asterisks or other symbols or underlining, things that don't only rely on color. And when it comes to fonts, we recommend sticking to sans serif fonts like Arial, Helvetica, and Calibri. So if you're not sure what serifs are, those are the sort of ornate parts at on the edge of letters. But generally, sans serif fonts that don't have those are easier to read for folks. And lastly, when it comes to font size, we want to aim for at least a 12-point font or larger in our emails. So obviously smaller fonts can be challenging to read, not just on a computer, but especially on, say, mobile devices where a lot more people are reading our communications these days. Okay, let's move on and let's talk about images and flyers. So this is really important when it comes to our communications. When you include an image in your email, you must include alternative text. For those of you that don't know, alternative text is kind of what it is. It's text, a text alternative to the picture on the screen. So depending on your email, email provider, they'll give you an option when you add an image to your email. So on the screen right now, this is a screenshot from my Gmail account, and I have added the Maryland Department of Disabilities Assistive Technology Program logo to an email. And one of the things below it says edit alt text. And if you click on that, it will provide you an option to add alt text for that image. That way, those using assistive technology can know what that image is. Any standard email provider will have something similar. I know Outlook has something like this, but everything should have something like that. Sometimes we'll use images as links to URLs. When you are using a image in this way, make sure your alt text should not be the description of that image. Your alt text should be a description of where that link is taking you. So if I used the Assistive Technology Program logo as a link to our website, I would just say, MDTAP website or something like that. So one area that folks can get into trouble with a little bit is with flyers and images of text. So if you post, let's say you create a flyer for an event that you want to post on social media or want to send out an email, know that any images that contain text in them will not be able to be read by a screen reader. So there needs to be a text alternative here. So if it's something simple like, call us at, and it's like a phone number or something like that, feel free to put that in the alt text of your image. But when it's a flyer that might have a lot of different information on it, like, where the event is, when it is, dates, other, information like that, you'll want to also put that in the text of your email. And the reason we recommend that is because when screen readers read the alternative text of an image, it will just read it all in one go. There won't be the ability to sort of pause or cipher through information. It just sort of reads it all in one, and then you're done. So if there's very specific information you need from there, whether it's a contact number or things like that, we definitely recommend putting it in the body of your email so that users can access that information easier. And then lastly, please do not include any flashing or animated images in your emails, anything that can't be turned off manually by the user. So these can be distracting and may even cause seizures for some individuals. Okay, so that's our images and flyers. Let's talk about link text. So this is a super common thing that we see, and is a super easy way to make your emails more accessible. So when I'm saying link text, I'm talking about the hyperlink text that will send users to an external website, so on and so forth. So your link text should clearly denote the destination. So screen reader users will often navigate through a website or through an email by certain aspects like links or buttons. And so if they're looking for a specific link destination and it's not clearly communicated in the link, for instance, click here or more, they won't know what that link is taking them to. So if if you want to send someone to the MDOD homepage, instead of writing click here, write MDOD homepage, so that even outside of context, users will know that that's where that's going to be taking them. Email addresses are generally fine to leave as is. Basically, when someone sees a so-and-so name at Gmail or whatever, they pick up the context. Okay, this is an email address. That's what that's going to be taking me to. But in terms of raw URLs, so if you're just copying and pasting the URL of a website or something, that may not always be clear, especially if you look up for instance, the URL for today's registration session had a ton of characters, numbers, letters, randomly. Screen readers will read all of that content. So if it's not relevant or important information, make sure to either change it to link text, or you can even use URL shorteners. But just know that if you're posting just a full link, that screen readers will read that entire thing. So we talked about how we don't want to use click here or more. We want to be descriptive with our link text. Also want to make sure that links are visibly distinguishable from regular text. And so this is, generally speaking, in most of your email or newsletter software, if you create a text, or create a link, it will both change the color and then underline it. So I know that's how Gmail does it. And that's great because it's not only using the color to convey that information, it's also underlining it so users know. Generally, this is done automatically, but you just want to sort of make sure that it does that way. Okay, moving on. So this is something that we're talking about more and more here at the state, and it's important for us to be including in all of our communications, not only just newsletters and emails, and that's plain language. We want to make sure that we use plain language in terms of whenever we're speaking with the public, especially when we talk about plain language, what we're saying is prioritizing clarity and ease of understanding for the intended audience. Our goal is to write something that is clear enough that readers can understand it the first time they read it. And so some aspects of that are, writing with your audience in mind. So avoiding jargon or overly complex sentences. If you need to use acronyms, and here at the state, we love using acronyms. It's important to define them in the first instance. For example, I work for the Maryland Department of Disabilities. If I were to, write this out in an email, I would say Maryland Department of Disabilities, and then put the acronym in parentheses, and then move on with the acronym from there, then on out. That's just an easy way to distinguish that for folks. What's also important is breaking large amounts of text into sort of shorter, digestible paragraphs. You don't want to have a wall of text. That can be, intimidating for a lot of people. One way to sort of help break that up is by, using some space. or also, grouping information into bullet points. So if you're finding that you have a sentence that has a lot of commas because you're listing out multiple things, try using bullet points. That will help break out the information and make it easier to digest. And so, finally, plain language, it does benefit everyone, as we've sort of been talking about with accessibility, but it's extremely important for readers that have, cognitive disabilities, limited English proficiency, or low literacy. And in terms of limited English proficiency, if you're using plain language to deliver your information, that information is a lot easier to be translated. So when we're talking about sort of inclusivity, that's another thing to sort of think about. All right, and then here are a couple of other sort of general tips when it comes to email accessibility. And this is, somewhat of best practices. In terms of attachments, always reference attachments that may be in your email in the body of your email. Don't just attach a document without mentioning it. Assistive technology will let users know, when there is an attachment, but it's a good best practice. Also, in terms of accessibility, it's important to make sure that anything that you do attach to your email is also accessible. So a great email with an inaccessible attachment sort of defeats the purpose. So if you have more questions about document accessibility, we do have a ton of webinars on creating accessible PowerPoints, accessible Word docs, accessible PDFs, and I've linked a webinar there on the slides. By the way, I'm not sure if I said it at the beginning, but I will be sending out the slide deck later this afternoon, so everyone has access to the information and the links provided. Okay, I want to take a second now and take a look to see if we have any questions before we move on. Opening up. Nothing in the Q&A and nothing in the chat. Okay, great. Sounds like everything's good to go. So we'll keep moving. And we're going to shift over to newsletter best practices. So newsletters are a little bit different. However, the nice thing about newsletters is everything that we talked about in terms of emails can also be used in newsletters as well. But newsletters have a much more, there's much more customization, and there's much more of a visual factor for us to keep in mind. But with that, there's more options for layout, but also means that there's also more things that we need to think about in terms of accessibility. And as I said, the good news is they've already, everything that we used in emails can also be applied to newsletters. So I do have a question I want to see here. What to use instead of click here? So that's a great question that's in terms of link text. So click here does not describe, where that's going to be sending the user. So instead, if it is, if you're trying to send someone to, a certain department website, instead of saying click here, you can say, MDOD website. And so that way, users will know exactly where it's taking them. Okay, hope that sort of answers your question there. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about headings. Headings are a crucial part of digital accessibility. And if you have done any of our other digital accessibility webinars, you might be familiar with them already. Headings are not really used in emails. Emails are, pretty much just a top-down, text-based. But headings let screen reader users sort of skip sections and navigate through chunks of information. I like to think about it like being able, this is going to show my age, being able to sort of skip ahead on a CD player to the track that you want to listen to versus listening all the way through to get to that specific track. And so there's, by including headings in our newsletters, this will allow folks to navigate to the section that they want to. And, here on the screen, I have a sort of an image of a sort of a standard heading structure. We have a document title, which is listed as an H1 or a heading 1. There's, information there. An H2 below it, so that's going to be information within that. So it's sort of nested within that. So if your document title, and then this is an important heading within that. And then an H3, so that's another, a lower heading that's sort of nested within that H2. So it's sort of like a Russian doll nesting structure. If you start on an H1 and then you just have different, sections within that H1, you can keep the rest of those sections as H2s. But as you nest within sections, you want to go to the lower numbers. So generally speaking, when it comes to newsletters, so there are presets to let you, code your heading structure, and they will generally be labeled. And so I can show you that a little bit later in Constant Contact. But screen readers will not pick up like, hey, this font is in a different color and it's larger text. It's just going to read the text as normal. So if you don't use the preset headers, screen reader users will not be able to navigate through that content. So generally speaking, we recommend following templates that are provided for you in your newsletter software. That will generally be the best case to give you the best outcome there. Okay, so now we talked about how newsletters provide different types of layouts for you that you wouldn't necessarily get in an email. When we're starting to mess with different layouts, you want to think about the order in which that information is supposed to be read. And so visually, folks can sort of look and sort of see where they want to go. However, assistive technology is going to read the content in the order in which it's been programmed to be read. And sometimes that may be wrong. So for someone using a screen reader, the content is read in the order that's based on the underlying code, not necessarily some logical flow. And sometimes that's based on the order in which content was put in a newsletter, or how a certain template was originally set to be set up. So something that gets folks into trouble is when you take a layout and you change it, especially like multi-column layouts. So that can severely affect reading order. So what might look visually appealing could end up being very jumbled when you're read with a screen reader. So like, for example, if you have 2 or more columns as part of a document, a screen reader might read the first line of column 1, and then the first line of column 2, and then the second line of column 1. And so that, that information gets mixed up together. Same thing with images. Images that are visually separated with their associated text may not be read in that same order. So, one thing that you can do to sort of check that is by using a screen reader and tabbing through that information to ensure that it is in your intended reading order. But also, we again emphasize using templates that were provided for you by your email provider or your newsletter provider, because those will generally have a reading order already set. Okay, so I'm going to check again if we have any other questions before we move on to our exercise today. I don't see any questions. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our exercise. So you all should have received an email from us at mdod.nva@maryland.com or .gov, sorry. So this is a newsletter that I created in Constant Contact, which is what we use to send out our newsletters. And it has some significant accessibility issues. So we're going to take, I'm going to say 10 minutes to sort of look through that and try to identify things that you find that are incorrect. As you go through it, feel free to put any of that information, anything that you find in the chat, and we'll come back together. And also, this is a reminder, if anyone didn't get that email from me, I think it says test email demonstration or something like that. please throw your email in the chat and I will, forward it to you very quickly. But it is 1:25 right now. So let's just take 10 minutes and take a look at that email. And again, if anyone hasn't gotten it yet, throw that email in the chat and I will send it to you momentarily. So 10 minutes. Let's come back at 1:35 and discuss what we got. Thanks. All right, I am not seeing too many more comments coming in. So I might just, have us go back to it now. And so we can take a look. A lot of great responses here. I'm going to scroll up and sort of start from the beginning. So Brandy says, learn more at the bottom is not descriptive. So let's take a look at the email here. Where does it say learn more? Oh, did you mean click here for more, Brandy, I think? Oh, yeah. Okay. Click here for more. Yeah, we don't know what that's taking us to. So if I look at the URL down here, I know that this is taking us to the MDTAP YouTube playlist, which, in this situation, I should have changed this to, MDTAP YouTube playlist or something like that. So great. Says register now through Zoom. Register for what? So that's a very good question, because we're not providing any information for the user, for what we're registering for. So very good noting about that. All right, moving on. Caitlin says the About Us paragraph could use some spacing or break up the chunk of text. Definitely. This is that wall of text, and I don't know if anyone tried reading through it, but it is not. I try to make this as jargony as possible. So that includes not sort of spelling out the IT Accessibility Initiative acronym, the NVA standards, MDOD, do it. So if you work in the state, you might know these acronyms already, but if this is going out to everyone, you want to spell those out. Also, in terms of plain language, what's the point of this email? Is it to provide us an About Us section? If it's not, you want to move that lower down. So in terms of our plain language practice, you want to put the most important information for the user up first. So really great points about that. I see here the fonts are off, wondering if they are the right headers. Ooh, that's a very good point. We'll talk about that in a second. So I think a couple of people have noticed that we have an image here that says join us August 17th, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. So this is an image that cannot be read by a screen reader unless it has the alt text. So, well, we'll take a look at what the alt text is there, but we want to, again, make sure that information is provided for us. Okay, more comments are moving in. Let's see. So the text of the body is too small. Yep, I think that this is like an 8 or a 9 or something like that. I don't remember, but you want at least a 12. Toby says missing alt text and images. So very good. So I'm not sure if Toby is a screen reader user or use the inspect tool, but if you inspect the image, which is something if you're familiar with this, so we don't have alt text for that. So very good. We'll take a look at it in Constant Contact to show you sort of more about that. So, but very nice, very good call out. Also, Cynthia notices that the headers are not tagged as headers. So the About Us, the mobile accessibility features, if they're not tagged as headers, you won't be able to jump to the information you needed to provide. And so I think, yeah, Cynthia used the inspect tool and was able to see. So here, so this isn't set up as a header at all. It's just using large, a 22-point font. So I'll show you how that looks in Constant Contact if you're not, familiar with using, the inspect window on your browsers. Okay, great. So let's just see what else we have here. I want to make sure I don't lose anything. Low color contrast. This is maybe the first thing that you saw, if you saw it. I mean, this contrast is absolutely terrible. So very good. Okay, So let's go back. Let's see if we got everything here. So we have insufficient color contrast, wall of text filled with jargon, URL. Oh, did we get that one? That the URL was spelled out all the way? Yeah, okay, good. Lisa Renee got that. We've got a click here for more button, unlabeled headings. So really nice, Cynthia, that you got that. A lot of people may have missed that. And then we have images of text on the screen. So yeah, a real nightmare for screen reader users here. So excellent job sort of, finding all that stuff. I know some of it was like, some of it was super obvious, some of it was not as obvious. It's probably going to be easier for you to look at sort of how we do this in the tool itself. Those of you who are not, that don't do a lot of work with web design may not, be familiar with a lot of these things. So what we're looking at right now is Constant Contact, which is our, software that we use to send out our newsletters. And so let's go through some of this. So starting with our logo here, our Assistive Technology Program logo. So from here, I can change or update this logo. Oh, where is it? Why won't you let me? Where's my alt text for this? Well, let's see here. So, well, I will say this, when you are adding an image, let's just add this randomly. You have the option to provide alt text down here. And so here, so right here, this is very common that the alt text will be set up as the file name. Sometimes it is, pretty, pretty spot on for what that is, man scratch his head. But also it will say the file type as well, or man underscore scratches underscore head, like, so you generally want to remove the file name and actually put in, descriptive text there. But you always want to make sure that whatever your alt text is, that it makes sense. Sometimes it'll just be, a random string of numbers there. So let's go ahead and cancel that. All right, and so first we have our low contrast here. Earlier, I talked about some contrast tools that you can use to sort of check. So I have a browser extension that I use. Let me just move this up here. Not sure if you could all see this. Yeah, so this browser extension is this little accessible color picker. And what this does is if I click on this, I have this, this extension that I can use an eyedropper. And where'd it go? Sometimes it's a little wonky. Of course, it's not working for me. Well, anyway, actually, I did this earlier so you could see. You use the eyedropper, and then you find the color that you want to test, and that picks up that color. Then you find your background color, and we'll pick that up. And here it shows you the compliance. So right now, we're at 1.305 to 1. So that is really, really low. We want to aim again for 4.5 to 1. So I'm going to change this to something that will be much more palatable for us. And let's go with white. White on red is generally a safe bet. And if let's see if that'll work now, if I can test this. No, all right, I'll have to change this manually. So white text on a red with this reddish black background, that's giving us a 4.6 contrast. So, and also is giving us, for those of you who know about WCAG, it's okay, that's meeting AAA compliance or AA compliance. So that's what we're looking for. Great. All right, moving on. So our About Us. So this is, someone talked about our headers. And so where are my headers here? All right, so right here, this P, this is sort of our lets us know what our heading types we have. So here we have got a paragraph, that's just your regular text. And then we have our heading sections. So we want this text to be our H1, and it is. And then our about us, which is sort of a subsection within that, we're going to label that as an H2. So again, you may not have recognized that was different just by looking at the email, but this is something that makes it a lot easier to understand, when you're using the program. So again, here we don't have it labeled as an H2. We're going to fix that. So now, if I want to skip to mobile accessibility features, I can skip down to it. All right. Next, we have our join us August 17th, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Let's see if our alt text worked. Let's see what our alt text is. All right. So this just says mobile training flyer.jpg. So this isn't giving us information. So for something like this, we can either add the alt text here. Again, if it's not much information, and this image doesn't have much information here, we can add that to the alt text, or we can add it to the body of the email so that everyone can see it. We have our wall of text here. I'm just gonna. Oh, you know what that is? It is at least 12 point. Let's bump it up a little bit. But obviously, we would want to rewrite this. This is, a mess of things here anyway. Same thing down here. Too small text. Let's bump that up to at least that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this URL, and I see this all the time where people will say, register now through Zoom, and then put a URL underneath it of the raw URL. Just make that register now through Zoom your hyperlink text. So I'm going to take that, and we're going to make that hyperlink. Let's see. So up here, I can make that a hyperlink. Let's see. Web page. All right. So now we know exactly what that or register for this session, through Zoom. And then obviously we talked about click here for more, MDOD, YouTube, playlist. And so we know what that's taking us to. Okay, great. So that is, how we do things in Constant Contact. Not every newsletter software is going to work the same way, but generally speaking, if you're using Constant Contact or MailChimp or any of the larger ones, they all sort of work sort of the same way. So something just to sort of keep in mind as you go about this. So I hope that was, a good sort of demonstration of that. And it looks like, everyone found all the things that I put in the email. So that's great. So excellent job on that. So, now I want to sort of move on to some resources that are available to you. So let's start off, obviously, a little bit of self-promotion for our MDTAP, the IT Accessibility Initiative website. So this is the office that I work within. Our website has a ton of resources on document accessibility. It has our training calendar, and it also has a link to our YouTube series. This is just, very helpful if you are new to accessibility. There are lots of different resources here available for you. You can also email us at mdod.nva@maryland.gov, and we should be able to answer any questions you have. Another resource I want to provide for you is the W3C website. Oh, I should have spelled that out first. So W3C stands for World Wide Web Consortium, and they are the organization that puts together the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And so these are sort of the worldwide accessibility guidelines that all of our accessibility laws, whether they are state, national or international guidelines are based on. And so their website provides resources sort of explaining all of those guidelines, but also general resources for accessibility Ton of things there. So a really great website and a great organization for digital accessibility. Okay, so we do have a little bit of time left. So I want to take some moments to sort of see, questions we have. I'm looking at the Q&A, and I do see some questions here. So I'd love to take some time and answer some of these. So we have someone who asks, is there a training we can take or any online tools on how to check our documents with a screen reader? So that is a great question. So thank you for that. One thing that I will say about that, so it depends, different screen readers are going to work a little bit differently. Two of the most popular ones are JAWS and NVDA. And these are PC-based screen readers. JAWS is a subscription-based service, which you pay a monthly fee to use. A lot of screen reader users will use that. NVDA, however, which works very similarly, is a free tool that you can download and use for yourself. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of resources that I know of to sort of teach you how to test with that specific program. However, I will say that it is the program that I use the most for my testing. So what you'll discover is, with NVDA, there's the ability to sort of move through interactive elements. So there's a mode where you could do that. And then there's also a mode where you can just read the page. And if you read the page, you can just press the down cursor and it will show you the order. And we'll also read the alt text for any images there. But that's a great question and probably something we could think about for a future training. I do know on our playlist, we have a training from a few years ago about how a native screen reader user uses a screen reader. But maybe for a future training, we can talk about screen reader like how we use it in terms of testing. So great. Oh, I will say there is another screen reader. So for anyone who's a Mac user, so Apple products have their own built-in screen reader user, their screen reader called VoiceOver. And as part of VoiceOver, so if you go into your settings and look for accessibility, you'll be able to find it there. There is a tutorial for using VoiceOver. I will say VoiceOver works in a very different way than NVDA or JAWS, but there is sort of a guide to sort of help navigate you through that. But yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay, looking in the chat to see if we have any other further questions. Let me know if there's anything else I can. We've got another. We have any specific recommendations for making accessible newsletters in GovDelivery? Okay, so GovDelivery is another newsletter, a specific software. So I don't use GovDelivery myself. However, a lot of the any of these best practices will work specific, will be specific to any of these programs. It's just a matter of how it's necessarily implemented. So if you're not sure on how to add headings in GovDelivery, that's you can certainly Google that and they'll be able to give you that information. We're not able to sort of cover every single newsletter software. I'm using Constant Contact here because that's the service that we use here internally. But yeah, thank you for that. Okay, any other question? Let's see, I answered this question earlier. Okay, well, great. All right, well, if not, I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes if anyone has any other questions. Again, I'm going to be sending this presentation out a little bit later today, the slides, and then we'll be sending out a recording of this later on in the week once we have everything dictated and up on YouTube. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week. So thank you very much.